I am Melissa Thompson, 32 years old, and last month my world shattered at a family dinner in Seattle. The house my cherished grandparents left me turned into a battleground for my entitled sister and my complicit parents. They had always showered her with everything while I scraped by on my own. That night she slapped me across the face, shoved me toward the door with brutal force, and snarled, "Get out of my house." My parents just sat there, their eyes cold and unmoving as I stumbled out into the yard, my arm bruised and my heart pounding. I stood under the streetlight staring at the locked door, my breath visible in the chilly air. A week later, a package landed on their doorstep. My mother blew up my phone with 45 missed calls, her voice frantically pleading. It was all a mistake. I texted back 3 words, "Get out now." Before coming to my story, I want to know what time you are listening and what city you are in. I am happy to know how far my story spreads. A week earlier, I sat at my apartment's dining table in Seattle, arranging plates for a family dinner I hoped would mend old wounds. I'd spent hours cooking lasagna from Grandma Dorothy's recipe, the smell of garlic and tomato filling my small space. My sister, 3 years older, arrived late with my parents, her eyes scanning my modest home with a familiar sneer. My mother, Patricia Thompson, handed me a store-bought dessert, muttering about traffic. My father, Robert Thompson, barely nodded, already asking for a beer. I forced a smile, setting out appetizers, determined to keep things civil. Conversation started light: work, weather, my parents' book club. Amanda Thompson, my sister, lounged in a chair, scrolling her phone, barely joining in. I mentioned my latest coding project, a budgeting app I'd pitched at work. Patricia waved it off, saying, "That's nice, Melissa, but let's hear about Amanda's new venture." Amanda launched into a story about her struggling startup, a fitness app that hadn't landed funding. "Investors don't get my vision," she complained, tossing her hair. Robert nodded sympathetically. "You'll find the right one, sweetheart." I bit my lip, used to their favoritism. The mood shifted when Patricia brought up the house my grandparents, Dorothy Wilson and Harold Wilson, left me. "Have you updated the kitchen yet?" she asked, her tone too casual. Amanda was saying it'd be perfect for her. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "It's my house," I said evenly. Amanda leaned forward, her voice sharp. "You don't need all that space, Melissa. I'm starting over after my app tanked. It'd be better with me." My chest tightened. "Grandma and Grandpa left it to me, not you." Robert cleared his throat. "It's a family house. Think about sharing, Melissa." Patricia chimed in, "Amanda's in a tough spot." "You're doing fine." I pushed back, voice steady despite my rising anger. "Fine. I've worked for everything while you've handed Amanda whatever she wanted." Amanda's face darkened. "Don't act superior just because you code apps nobody uses." The insult stung, but I held my ground. "At least I don't expect handouts." The table went silent. Then Amanda stood, her chair scraping the floor. "You're so selfish," she spat, stepping closer. Before I could react, her hand cracked across my cheek, the sting sharp and hot. She grabbed my arm, shoving me toward the door. "Get out of my house," she yelled, as if my apartment were hers. I stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold, and fell onto the grass outside, my arm scraping the pavement. Patricia and Robert sat frozen, their faces blank, not a word of protest. I pulled myself up, tasting blood from my lip, and glared at the shut door. Something snapped inside me. "Game over," I whispered to myself, brushing dirt off my sleeve. I drove to a nearby coffee shop, my hands shaking on the wheel. My phone lit up with a text from my colleague Rebecca Hayes. "You okay? Call me." I dialed her number, my voice low as I recounted the fight. "They want the house, Rebecca. They think it's theirs." Her response was firm. "You need to protect what's yours, Melissa. Start digging." That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop, pulling up the house's deed and Grandma Dorothy's will. I wasn't giving up without a fight. The next morning, I sat at my desk, the sting of Amanda's slap still fresh on my cheek. My laptop glowed with the deed to the house Grandma Dorothy Wilson and Grandpa Harold Wilson left me. Their words from the will echoed in my mind. "Melissa, you showed us true love. I wasn't letting my sister or parents take that away." I opened a browser, pulling up property records for our Seattle neighborhood. The house, valued at $200,000 when I inherited it 3 years ago, now sat at nearly $1 million. The tech boom had transformed our street into a hot market. My hands steadied as I realized the power I held. I dialed Rebecca Hayes, my colleague and closest confidant, her voice sharp over the phone. "Melissa, you need to lock this down. They're banking on you caving." She suggested a lawyer she knew, a property expert named Karen Walsh. I called Karen, explaining the situation. "My sisters demand my parents silence the house." "Send me the will and deed," Karen said briskly. "Washington law is clear on inheritance. Let's see what we're working with. By noon, I emailed her the documents, my fingers trembling not from fear but from purpose. Karen called back that afternoon. Good news, she said. The will is airtight, signed with 3 witnesses, and a doctor's note confirming your grandparents' mental clarity. Your parents and sister have been living there without permission, technically squatting. I leaned back stunned. Squatting. Amanda had been crashing in the guest room, claiming it as her office for her failing fitness app. Patricia and Robert stayed over often, acting like the house was theirs. Karen continued, you can issue an eviction notice 72 hours under state law, or sell it outright. Your call. I dug deeper, pulling up old emails from Patricia. Months ago, she'd asked about the house's wiring, claiming Amanda needed stable internet for her startup. Robert had texted about the garage, saying it'd be perfect for Amanda's equipment. It hit me they'd been planning this for months, assuming I'd roll over. I remembered Grandma Dorothy's voice, calm but firm, one evening when I was 16. We'd sat in her garden debugging code on her ancient desktop. You're tougher than they think, Melissa, she'd said, her hands steady on the keyboard. Don't let their noise drown you out. Grandpa Harold had nodded, tweaking a circuit board. Build your own path, kid. Rebecca met me for coffee that evening at a shop near Pike Place Market. This is your moment, she said, stirring her latte. They've taken enough, your college fund, your time, your peace. Demand, what's yours? I nodded, my resolve hardening. Back home, I spread out the documents, the will deed, and a market analysis I'd run through my real estate app. The numbers were clear. Selling the house to a young family, the Carters, for $850,000 was locked in papers signed last week. I hadn't told my family, knowing they'd fight it. I drafted a plan with Karen. We'd send a package to the house, certified copies of the will, the sale contract, and an eviction notice. The Carters, a couple with 2 kids, loved the garden and the smart home system I'd coded. They'd move in next month. I pictured Amanda's smug face when she opened that package, Patricia's panic, Robert's silence crumbling. For 30 years, I'd been the one to compromise, to step aside. Not this time. Sitting with those documents, my mind drifted to the years of being overlooked in our Seattle home. Growing up, my grandparents, Dorothy Wilson and Harold Wilson, were my anchor. Their cozy house with its creaky porch and blooming garden was where I felt valued. They'd sit me at their old PC, teaching me to code simple games, their patience endless. You've got a spark, Melissa, Grandma Dorothy would say, her eyes bright. Grandpa Harold would chuckle, tweaking a motherboard. Keep building, kid. You'll outshine them all. Meanwhile, my parents, Patricia Thompson and Robert Thompson, poured everything into my sister, Amanda Thompson, 3 years older. When I was 15, I needed a laptop for a coding camp. Patricia said, we're tight on funds. A week later, Amanda got a brand new MacBook for her startup ideas. I worked weekends at a coffee shop to buy a used Dell, its keys sticking from overuse. At 16, Amanda got a shiny SUV for her birthday, while I rode the city bus, my backpack heavy with library books. Amanda has big dreams, Robert would say, shrugging off my straight A report cards. You're fine, Melissa. Fine. That word burned. My college fund was another casualty. At 18, I learned it had vanished into Amanda's first app venture, a social media platform that crashed in 4 months. Unexpected expenses, Patricia mumbled when I asked. I worked 30 hours a week through college, coding freelance apps to cover tuition, still pulling a 3.8 GPA in computer science. Amanda dropped out of 2 universities each time, with my parents' excuses and cash for her next vision. I'd call Grandma Dorothy, voice shaky, venting about the unfairness. They're blind to your worth, she'd say, her voice steady over tea in her kitchen. But you're stronger than their mistakes. One night when I was 17, I sat on their porch, tears streaming, after Patricia canceled my science fair trip to fund Amanda's coding boot camp. Grandpa Harold handed me a soldering iron. Fix what's broken, Melissa, starting with yourself. Their belief kept me going. When they passed 3 years ago, their will left me the house with a letter in Dorothy's neat handwriting. Melissa, you gave us love when others only took. This house is yours to protect. Amanda scoffed at the reading, tossing her hair. Good luck with that fixer-upper. I poured my savings into the house, coding a smart system to control lights and security, preserving the garden Dorothy loved. Amanda, meanwhile, racked up debt on her fitness app, always expecting a bailout. Patricia and Robert never questioned her, their praise endless. Amanda's a risk-taker, they'd say, ignoring my late-night coding sessions to meet work deadlines. I'd overhear them at holiday dinners, whispering about giving Amanda the house for stability. Stability. As if I hadn't earned it. The final straw was a memory from 2 years ago. I'd found an old photo of me and Dorothy in the garden, her arm around me, both of us smiling. Tucked behind it was another note from her, Melissa. You're the one who carries our love forward. Don't let them steal your fire. That note, now in my desk drawer, fueled my anger as I sat with the deed. For 30 years I'd been pushed aside. My efforts dismissed, my inheritance targeted. Amanda's slap wasn't just physical, it was the culmination of their entitlement. I wasn't just protecting a house, I was reclaiming my worth. Back at my apartment, I finalized the plan with Karen. The house sale to the Carters, a young couple with 2 kids, was locked in at $850,000, papers signed and notarized. Karen had prepared a package, certified copies of Grandma Dorothy's will, the sale contract, and a 72-hour eviction notice under Washington law. This will hit them hard, she said over the phone, her voice calm but firm. They've been squatting illegally. You're within your rights. I nodded, picturing Amanda's smug grin fading. I overnighted the package to the house, my hands steady as I handed it to the courier. The next day, I left Seattle for a work conference in Portland, needing distance. My phone stayed on silent, but I knew the storm was coming. Rebecca texted, package delivered. Brace yourself. By evening, my voicemail was flooded. Patricia's first message was shaky. Melissa, what's this about a sale? Call me now. Amanda's was pure venom. You're not getting away with this. Robert left a single gruff message, we need to talk. I ignored them all, focusing on my conference keynote, a pitch for my budgeting app. It felt like a small rebellion, prioritizing my work over their chaos. 2 days later, Karen called with an update. They opened the package, she said. Your mother's been calling my office nonstop, claiming it's a mistake. Amanda's hired a lawyer, some guy named Paul Grayson. I smirked, knowing the will's strength: 3 witnesses, a doctor's note untouchable after 3 years under Washington statute of limitations. Let them try, I told Karen. What's next? She explained the eviction process. The Carters would take possession in 3 weeks, and the sheriff could enforce the notice if my family resisted. They're panicking, she added. Amanda's screaming about her rights to the house. I pictured the scene at the house. Amanda pacing the living room she'd claimed as her office, ripping open the package to find the sale contract. Patricia clutching the will, her face pale as she read Dorothy's words, naming me sole heir. Robert silent as always, staring at the eviction notice. They'd assumed I'd hand over the house like I'd handed over my college fund, my time, my dignity. But I'd learned from Dorothy's quiet strength, her lessons in standing firm. You don't owe them anything, she told me once, her hand squeezing mine as we debugged code together. Amanda's lawyer called me that afternoon, his tone slick. My client believes there's been a misunderstanding, Paul said. The house is a family asset. I cut him off. The will says it's mine. Check the records. He stammered, mentioning a possible contest. You're 3 years too late, I said, my voice cold. The sale's binding. Tell Amanda to pack. Karen confirmed later that Paul backed off, admitting the case was dead on arrival. Washington law didn't bend for entitled siblings. I stayed in Portland another day, letting my family stew. Rebecca sent updates. Amanda had posted a rant on social media, calling me a traitor. Patricia tried rallying cousins, claiming I'd stolen their legacy. I didn't respond. The Carters, unaware of the drama, emailed me a thank you note, gushing about the garden and the smart system I'd coded. Our kids can't wait to move in, they wrote. I smiled, knowing Dorothy and Harold would have loved their excitement. Back in Seattle, I met Rebecca at a diner near my office. They're falling apart, she said, sipping coffee. Amanda's lawyer dropped her. Your parents are begging for a meeting. I shook my head. No meetings. They made their choice. I'd spent decades swallowing their demands, but the eviction notice was my line in the sand. Amanda's slapped their silence. It all led here. I wasn't just selling a house. I was breaking free. 3 days after the package arrived, the fallout began. Amanda's lawyer, Paul Grayson, sent a final email admitting defeat. Washington's 3-year statute of limitations on will contests had expired, and the notarized documents were ironclad. The Carters, the new buyers, were set to move into the house in 18 days. Amanda, Patricia, and Robert had 72 hours to vacate, or the sheriff would step in. Karen called me at my Portland hotel, her voice steady. They're out of moves, Melissa. The house is legally gone. I leaned back, a quiet satisfaction settling in. For once, their entitlement had no leverage. Back in Seattle, Amanda's world unraveled. Her fitness app startup, already struggling with missed loan payments, collapsed when creditors caught wind of her unstable housing. The bank seized her assets under Washington's lien laws, leaving her with nothing but a leased car and a pile of debt. She posted a desperate plea on social media, framing herself as a victim of my greed. Cousins and aunts flooded my inbox with accusations, parroting her story. I forwarded them the will and sale contract, letting Grandma Dorothy's words speak for themselves. Most went silent, their support for Amanda fading as the truth spread. Patricia and Robert faced their own reckoning. To cover Amanda's startup loans, they'd refinanced their own home 2 years ago, a risky move in Seattle's volatile market. With the house gone and no bailout from me, they couldn't keep up with payments. They filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, a public record that hit the local news. Their suburban home, once a status symbol, was foreclosed. They moved into a cramped rental apartment downtown, their social circle shrinking as friends distanced themselves from the scandal. Patricia's book club stopped inviting her. Robert's golf buddies canceled their outings. I watched from afar back at my Seattle apartment. Rebecca met me for lunch at a cafe near Lake Union, her eyes wide as she scrolled through the latest headlines. Amanda's posting about moving into a motel, she said, shaking her head. Your parents' foreclosure is all over the neighborhood forum. I sipped my coffee, feeling no guilt. For 32 years, they'd taken from me my college fund, my opportunities, my peace. Now their choices had built their own cage. Grandma Dorothy's voice echoed in my mind from a night we'd coded a light sensor for her garden. Actions have consequences, Melissa, she'd said, wiring a circuit. Yours and theirs. Amanda tried calling once, her voice cracking through a voicemail. You've ruined me, Melissa. Where am I supposed to go? I didn't reply. She'd made her bed when she raised her hand against me, when she demanded what wasn't hers. Patricia sent texts begging for a meeting to fix this. I blocked her number. Robert left a message, his tone flat. You've gone too far. I deleted it without a second thought. Their attempts to guilt me felt hollow, a last gasp of control slipping away. The local paper ran a story on the house sale mentioning the family dispute without my name. Neighbors who'd seen me tend Dorothy's garden for years sent supportive emails. Your grandparents would be proud, one wrote. The Carters sent photos of their kids playing in the yard, the roses blooming under their care. I smiled, knowing the house was alive with new memories, just as Dorothy and Harold wanted. Rebecca and I toasted at the cafe, clinking glasses of iced tea. You flipped the script, she said, grinning. They thought they'd break you. I nodded, my chest light. The dominoes had fallen not because I pushed, but because they'd built a house of cards. Amanda's slap, their silence, their greed, it all led here. I wasn't reveling in their pain, but I wasn't carrying it either. For the first time, I felt untethered. 2 months later, I stood in my new bungalow in Seattle, sunlight streaming through the windows. The small house, tucked in an up-and-coming neighborhood, was half the size of Grandma Dorothy's, but perfect for me. I'd painted the walls a soft gray, hung a photo of Dorothy and Harold in the garden, and planted rose cuttings from their old yard. With the $850,000 from the house sale, I'd invested in my dream, an education app teaching kids to code. Partnering with Rebecca Hayes, I launched it last month, and early downloads were climbing fast. My new life felt like a clean slate. I'd cut all ties with my family. Amanda Thompson, my sister, had spiraled further after losing her startup. With her assets seized, she couldn't afford her leased car or motel rent. Last I heard, she was working part-time at a coffee shop, living in a shared apartment with strangers, her social media silent. Seattle's tough job market offered no mercy for her lack of experience. Patricia Thompson and Robert Thompson, my parents, were hit harder. Their Chapter 7 bankruptcy stripped them of their suburban home, forcing them into a tiny rental near the city's edge. Their social standing crumbled. Patricia's book club dropped her, and Robert's former colleagues avoided him. A local blog mentioned their foreclosure, tying it to family mismanagement. They'd become pariahs in their own circle. I didn't gloat, but I didn't grieve either. Their choices favoring Amanda, ignoring me, demanding my inheritance, had built this outcome. Grandma Dorothy's lessons rang clear. Your worth isn't their approval, she'd said, showing me how to debug code under her porch light. Harold's gruff advice, stand tall, kid, echoed as I built my app. Their love, not my family's, was my foundation. I blocked Patricia's last text, a plea to talk it out. Amanda's final voicemail accusing me of betrayal went straight to trash. Robert hadn't reached out since the eviction notice landed. My app's success grew. A Seattle tech conference invited me to speak, and I shared the stage with coders I'd admired for years. Rebecca cheered from the front row, her grin wide as I demoed the app's features. You're killing it, she said later over drinks at a downtown bar. Dorothy would be proud. I nodded, thinking of the nights I'd coded with her, her steady voice guiding me. The app wasn't just a job, it was my way of passing on her belief in building something meaningful. One evening I drove past the old house. The Carters had settled in, their kids' bikes leaning against the fence, roses blooming brighter than ever. A new sign hung by the gate naming the garden after Dorothy. I didn't stop, just slowed enough to take it in. The house wasn't mine anymore, but its spirit lived.
Have you lost your mind? It was my father's funeral, Liam. I screamed into my phone, barely recognizing my own voice. The pictures were still open on my laptop. Liam grinning at his best friend Daniel's bachelor party, drink in hand, surrounded by women in tiny dresses. The timestamp made me sick to my stomach. 2:45 p.m. last Saturday, exactly when I was watching my father's casket being lowered into the ground. I called you 3 times that day. 3 times. And you texted back saying you were too sick to come. My name is Emma Collins, and at 28 years old, I never expected to lose both my father and my fiancé in the same week. Not that Liam was technically gone yet. He was still on the other end of the phone, stammering excuses about prior commitments and how Daniel really needed him there. But in my heart, I knew the man I thought I was going to marry had died the moment I saw those Instagram posts. The worst part wasn't even the partying or the women. It was the look of pure joy on his face while I was living through the darkest day of my life. I sat at my kitchen counter, still wearing one of my dad's old cardigans that I'd been living in since he passed, staring at the 3-carat ring on my finger that suddenly felt like it was burning my skin. You don't understand, Emma. Liam's voice took on that condescending tone I'd heard more often lately. Daniel's my best friend. This was his last big celebration before settling down. Your dad, well, he was already gone. It's not like me being there would have brought him back. The casual cruelty of his words hit me like a physical blow. My dad had always been quietly skeptical of Liam, gently asking me if I was sure about him even from his hospital bed. You'll figure him out eventually, sweet pea, he'd said with a knowing look. Now, just days after losing him, I finally understood what he'd seen all along. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs long before the funeral. My dad's battle with cancer had been brutal. 8 months of watching this strong, vibrant man who'd raised me single-handedly after Mom died slowly slip away. Through every chemotherapy session and doctor's appointment, Liam always had an excuse for why he couldn't come with me. Work meetings, family obligations, last-minute emergencies with friends. I made excuses for him, telling myself and my dad that he was just uncomfortable around hospitals, that not everyone could handle seeing someone they cared about suffering. The thing about grief is that it has a way of stripping away the lies we tell ourselves. My dad was my rock, my compass, the person who taught me everything from how to change a tire to how to stand up for myself. He worked 2 jobs to put me through college, never missing a single parent-teacher conference or dance recital when I was growing up. Even when he got sick, he was more worried about me than himself. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself, sweet pea, he'd say, squeezing my hand with what strength he had left. Don't let anyone dim your light. I'd nod and change the subject, not ready to face what he was really trying to tell me. Sophia, my best friend since college, had tried to open my eyes too. She'd notice how Liam would dismiss my opinions during dinner parties, or how he'd forget to invite me to important work events where other partners were welcome. He treats you like an afterthought, Emma, she'd say gently. But I was too invested in the fairy tale I'd built in my head. The successful marketing executive who'd swept me off my feet, the perfect proposal at sunset on the beach, the lifestyle magazine's version of happiness. My dad's death shattered that carefully constructed illusion, forcing me to see what had been there all along. A man who could party while I buried my father, who could laugh while my world fell apart. I took a deep, shaky breath and looked at the photos again. There was Liam, playfully tossing cash at a dancer while my mascara was running down my face at the funeral. Another shot showed him carrying Daniel on his shoulders in a pool at 4 p.m., right when I was trying to hold it together during my dad's eulogy. Each swipe felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The comments under the posts made it even worse. Best bachelor party ever. And living your best life, bro. Meanwhile, my phone was full of heartfelt condolence messages I couldn't even bring myself to answer. Emma, are you still there? Liam's voice crackled through the phone, snapping me back to reality. Look, I know the timing wasn't great, but you're being dramatic. It's not like I could just bail on Daniel. We've been best friends since high school. I could hear the familiar sounds of his office in the background. He couldn't even give this conversation his full attention. Something inside me shifted, like a switch being flipped. The tears stopped, replaced by a cold clarity I'd never felt before. "You're right, Liam," I said quietly, twisting the engagement ring off my finger. "The timing wasn't great, just like it wasn't great when you missed Dad's last Christmas because of your company ski trip, or when you left halfway through his birthday dinner because Daniel needed help moving." I could practically hear him rolling his eyes through the phone. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the bachelor party. This was about years of small betrayals I'd excused, of boundaries I'd let him cross, of red flags I'd painted pink through rose-colored glasses. Dad would have been so disappointed in how little I'd valued myself. "You know what, Emma? I've had enough of this guilt trip," Liam snapped, his voice rising. "I get that you're sad about your dad, but life goes on. Daniel spent thousands on this party, and as his best man..." I cut him off, my hand gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "As his best man? What? You had to watch him do body shots while I was saying goodbye to my father? Had to pose with those girls while I was picking out a casket?" My voice was trembling, but not from sadness anymore. Pure rage coursed through my veins as 3 years of suppressed anger finally broke free. "Tell me, Liam, did you even think about me once that day?" The silence on his end was deafening. Then came his response, dripping with that patronizing tone he'd perfected over the years. "Of course I thought about you, babe. I even sent you a text, remember?" A bitter laugh escaped my throat. One text. A single message saying he was too sick to come, followed by a sad face emoji. That's what my father's funeral, what my grief, was worth to him. I opened my laptop again, this time pulling up my email. "You want to know something interesting, Liam? Daniel's fiancé just sent me some videos from the party. Apparently she feels terrible about what happened." I heard him inhale sharply. "Would you like to know what time you posted that lovely TikTok of you doing the worm on the beach? Because I can tell you exactly what I was doing at 3:27 p.m. I was trying to find the strength to read the eulogy I'd written for my dad." There was rustling on his end of the line, the sound of a door closing. Finally, he was taking this seriously. "Emma, listen to me." His voice had dropped to a whisper. "Those videos, they don't tell the whole story. I was just trying to keep Daniel's spirits up. You know how he gets when he drinks. More excuses. Always more excuses. But this time, I wasn't buying them." "Let me tell you what those videos do show, Liam," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "They show you knocking back shots with the groomsmen at 2 p.m. when I texted you asking if you'd at least come to the reception. They show you dancing on tables at 5 p.m. when I was sorting through Dad's belongings with Sophia because I couldn't bear to do it alone. But most importantly, they show exactly who you are, not who I've been pretending you are for the past 3 years." The sounds of Liam's office faded away, replaced by what I assumed was him ducking into a stairwell. "You're being hysterical," he hissed. "This isn't about the party at all, is it? This is about your dad. You're just looking for someone to blame because he's gone." His words hit me like a slap in the face. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, Dad and me at my college graduation, both of us beaming with pride. He'd worked overtime for months to help pay for my final semester. "You're right about one thing," I replied, surprised by how calm I felt. "This isn't just about the party. It's about the fact that while you were living it up at that beach resort, Sophia drove 3 hours in the rain to be with me. It's about how Daniel's fiancé, who I've met twice, sent me a heartfelt condolence card while you couldn't even bother to show up. It's about how you've shown me, beyond any doubt, that you will always choose your own comfort over my pain." I could hear him starting to protest, but for once I didn't let him interrupt. These words had been building up for too long. "You want to talk about time, Liam? Let's talk about it," I continued, pulling up the photo gallery on my phone. Here's a lovely shot of you doing karaoke at 6 p.m., right when I was having a breakdown in my car because Dad's empty house felt too overwhelming. Oh, and look at this one from Sunday morning. You poolside with a mimosa while I was meeting with the funeral home to settle the final bills. Would you like me to keep going?" There was a long pause, followed by the sound of him clearing his throat. "Okay, I messed up," he finally admitted, but his tone was more annoyed than remorseful. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. But you can't just throw away 3 years together over one mistake. Think about the wedding, the house we talked about buying. Are you really willing to give up our future because I made one bad decision?" I looked down at the engagement ring sitting on my counter, remembering how proud I'd been to show it to Dad in the hospital. His response hadn't been what I expected. Instead of congratulating me, he'd taken my hand and asked, "But does he make you proud, sweet pea?" At the time, I'd brushed off his concern. Now those words echoed in my mind like a warning I should have heeded. "You're right again, Liam," I said quietly. "One mistake shouldn't end a relationship. But this isn't one mistake, is it? This is just the first time I've been strong enough to see them all clearly." "What are you saying?" Liam's voice had lost its condescending edge, replaced by something closer to panic. I picked up the ring, turning it over in my palm one last time. All those nights I'd spent admiring how it sparkled, dreaming of our future together, felt like memories from another life now. A life where I was smaller, weaker, willing to accept scraps of affection and call it love. "I'm saying that my father's last gift to me was clarity," I replied, dropping the ring into an envelope along with the stack of photos I'd printed from Daniel's fiancé's social media. He spent his whole life showing me what real love looks like, showing up when it matters, choosing my happiness over his convenience, being there even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. My voice cracked slightly, but I pressed on. "And you, Liam, you've spent the last 3 years showing me exactly the opposite." The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything I'd left unsaid over the years. Every time I'd swallowed my disappointment when he bailed on family dinners, every forced smile when he'd dismiss my accomplishments at work, every tear I'd hidden when he'd choose his friends over me. Finally, Liam spoke, his voice tight with anger. "So that's it? You're really going to throw everything away over this?" "God, Emma, I knew you were sensitive, but this is ridiculous. You know what? Take some time to calm down. Call me when you're thinking rationally again." "Actually," I said, sealing the envelope with a sense of finality, "I am thinking rationally for the first time in years. The ring will be in your mailbox tomorrow. Don't try to contact me again." Before he could respond, I ended the call and blocked his number. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. Dad's voice echoed in my memory. "You'll figure him out eventually, sweet pea." As tears rolled down my cheeks, I smiled through them. "You were right, Dad," I whispered. "You were right all along." The next few weeks were a blur of condolence cards, well-meaning casseroles from neighbors, and a deafening silence from Liam's side of the world. I'd expected him to fight harder, to show up at my door with grand apologies and bigger promises. Instead, all I got was a series of increasingly angry texts from his sister about how I was breaking her brother's heart and being selfish. I blocked her number too. Sophia practically moved in with me during those first difficult days. She'd come over after work, armed with takeout and patience, sitting with me while I alternated between crying over Dad and raging about Liam. "You know what the worst part is?" I told her one evening, curled up on my couch in Dad's old cardigan. "I keep finding things I want to tell Dad about all this. Every time something happens, my first thought is still to call him." She just nodded, understanding that some pains don't need solutions. They just need witnesses. The real wake-up call came when I started packing up my dad's house. In his study, I found a letter he'd written to me just weeks before he passed. "My dearest Emma," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you these things in person. But there are some truths that need to be said." He went on to write about how proud he was of me, how much joy I'd brought to his life, Then came the part that made my heart stop. I've watched you shrink yourself to fit into Liam's world, sweet pea. I've seen you dim your light to keep from outshining him. That's not the daughter I raised. That's not the woman you're meant to be. Reading those words, surrounded by the remnants of my dad's life, his favorite coffee mug still on the desk, his reading glasses folded neatly beside it, something shifted inside me. I realized that I wasn't just grieving Dad's death. I was grieving the person I'd become with Liam. The way I'd learned to make myself smaller, to apologize for having needs, to accept less than I deserved. Dad had seen it all, and in his final act of love, he'd given me permission to break free. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I opened my laptop and went through our old photos together. There was the night Liam proposed, me beaming at the camera while he looked slightly impatient, already checking his phone. Our last Christmas together, where he spent most of Dad's dinner party networking with my cousin's husband about potential business contacts. Even our happiest moments were tinged with signs I'd chosen to ignore. "Oh, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "How did you see it so clearly when I couldn't see it at all?" 3 days later, the real test came. I was at the grocery store, mindlessly pushing my cart through the aisles, when I literally ran into Daniel and his new wife, Sarah. My heart jumped into my throat. These were the first people from Liam's circle I'd seen since everything happened. But before I could mumble an excuse and escape, Sarah stepped forward and hugged me tightly. "Emma, I am so sorry," she said, pulling back to look at me with genuine concern. "I've been wanting to reach out, but I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear from me. What Liam did, there's no excuse for it." Daniel stood awkwardly behind her, shifting from foot to foot, guilt written all over his face. I noticed he couldn't quite meet my eyes. "I tried to tell him not to come," Daniel finally blurted out. "When he showed up at the party, I asked him about the funeral. He said you'd told him not to worry about it, that you had plenty of support." The fluorescent lights of the grocery store suddenly felt too bright, the aisle too narrow. I should have known he was lying. I should have said something more. "I'm sorry, Emma." Something about their genuine remorse, standing there between the cereal boxes and canned vegetables, broke through the protective wall I'd built around myself. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, surprising myself with a small laugh. "He didn't even reach out after Dad died. No flowers, no card. Just that one text claiming he was sick, then radio silence until I saw the party photos." Sarah's face darkened with anger, and I saw Daniel wince. "That's not even the worst part," Sarah added hesitantly. "He's been telling everyone that you ended things because you're emotionally unstable after your dad's death, that you're not thinking clearly and will come to your senses eventually." She pulled out her phone, showing me some of his recent social media posts, carefully crafted stories painting him as the patient, understanding fiancé dealing with his grieving partner's irrational behavior. Instead of the fury I expected to feel, a strange calm washed over me. "You know what?" I said, straightening my shoulders. "Let him tell whatever story helps him sleep at night. The people who matter know the truth, and the people who believe his lies probably weren't meant to be in my life anyway." I saw respect flash across Sarah's face while Daniel looked even more ashamed. It's been 6 months since Dad passed away, and 4 months since I ended things with Liam. The grief still comes in waves. Some days I can smile at Dad's photos, other days I still reach for the phone to call him. But ending things with Liam? That pain faded faster than I expected, replaced by a growing sense of freedom I hadn't even known I was missing. Last week, I was going through the last box of Dad's things when I found his old leather journal. Inside, on the very last page, he'd written something that made me cry and laugh at the same time. "My Emma has always been stronger than she knows. Sometimes life's hardest moments are actually gifts in disguise. They show us who we really are, and more importantly, who others really are too." Next to these words was a small drawing of a butterfly breaking free from its cocoon. It was exactly the kind of quiet wisdom Dad had always shared with me, right up until the end. Looking at that sketch now, I realize that's exactly what happened. Losing Dad broke my heart, but it also broke the spell I was under with Liam. Sometimes it takes our greatest loss to find our greatest strength. And so I find myself here, on the other side of everything, different, yet more myself than I've ever been. Grief has a way of hollowing you out, carving space for truth to take root. Losing Dad was the greatest loss of my life, but it also gave me the clarity to walk away from a love that wasn't love at all. The ache of his absence is something I carry every day, but it no longer feels like a weight pressing me down. Instead, it's a reminder of the lessons he left me, to value myself, to expect real love, and to never let anyone dim my light. Liam is a closed chapter now, and with him went the ring, the photos, and the carefully curated illusion of our life together. What replaced them was far more precious: peace. I've started journaling again, using the notebook I found among my dad's things. Each page feels like a step forward, a way to reclaim my voice. Tonight I sit on my dad's porch, watching the sun set behind the hills, the sky painted in colors he would have called perfect for fishing. For the first time in a long time, I feel something unexpected: hope. Life doesn't just go on after heartbreak, it finds ways to bloom. Even in the shadow of loss, even in the wreckage of love gone wrong, there's space for growth. And as I sit here, wrapped in my dad's old cardigan, I know this for certain: I'm ready to grow.